Success. Okay. 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 Just making sure this is all working correctly. Want to view my stream. Making sure this is all working correctly. Want to view my stream. Making sure this is all working correctly. Great. View my stream. Making sure this is all working correctly. Okay. View my stream. Make sure this is all working correctly. Okay. View my stream. Make sure this is all working correctly. Okay. Okay. Now to okay. Now to get going. I'm gonna have multi-streaming going on all of these. Get going. I'm gonna have multi-streaming going on all of these. One more account I have to get up, and then I can start reading this. One more account I have to get up, and then I can start reading this. One more account I have to get up, and then I can start reading this. One more account I have to get up, and then let me go ahead and mute that. Great, everything seems to be working, and I'm gonna go live on X as well, which I've never done this before, so this is gonna be a good time. Spaces. Everyone, wow, why not? Spaces, we want to talk about Fragments of Divinity, Chapter 1. That'll be my goal for today. Okay. Maybe we'll get some Q&A. That would be amazing. I'm wondering what topics. It's like fantasy, entertainment, reading. It's going to be entertainment. Just books, really. Fantasy. Lord of the Rings, Disney. No. Lord of the Rings. Maybe. But not really. Goodness, there's not any options to choose from. Just say entertainment. Why not indie films? Arts and culture. It's books, really. You know. Fiction literature. There we go. That's exactly what. Okay. Entertainment. And yeah, that's it. So we'll just do that. Save. Record space, allow incognito. No, I'll just start my space. I gotta enable my microphone apparently. Permissions. Microphone. There we go. Okay. All right. So, hello. I have started the audiobook reading, and now I'm going to actually grab the microphone because that way this is more of an interactive experience. Okay, turn my microphone on. I guess my microphone wasn't even on. I'm really glad I saw that. I'm just going to edit the audio afterwards. So hello everybody. It's Berevinu Manjaopani here. It's nice to meet you. I've been doing a lot of auditions recently and self-tapes and trying to get everywhere, but in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and read my audiobook aloud, and it's sort of live reading, live editing on the fly, and I hope you enjoy. So this is Fragments of Divinity, Chapter 1, A Childhood Lost. Okay. Nave gazed fixedly into the dark forest bordering Ardria Castle, where two young girls were playing freely after another war. It was all he could do not to run and join them, but the harsh years of military discipline steadied his resolve, so he drew them in the dirt with a stick instead. His expression became stone as his thoughts were brought back into focus by the sound of sequenced footsteps. The soldiers were gathering to the west of the castle, and soon he too would be expected. Nave dropped the stick and wrapped his arms protectively over his knees, his long dark brown hair falling forward, covering his many scars. He couldn't stand the drills and Arshnad's constant watch. For one day he just wanted to be as other children instead of tested, but no such luck. Raja's shadow loomed overhead just as soon as the thought crossed his mind. "Nave, come now. You can't be late again. It'll just make things worse," said a powerful figure, holding forth a hand. "Can't I rest this once, Master Raja? I've watched the other children play from my balcony. Do you think you could ask King Arshnad if I could join them?" asked Nave pleadingly. A pained expression crossed Raja's face as he knelt down, resting a still outstretched massive hand on Nave's shoulder. "There's nothing I'd like more, but you know as well as I the answer'd be." "But I'm not a machine," Nave protested. "What does he expect of me?" Raja's expression did not change as he lifted Nave by the arm and led him through the outer halls to the castle at the training grounds. In all honesty, Nave was a machine compared to the Hathos Knights. He didn't require rest like the others after the long days of training, but he was tired in ways that most couldn't comprehend. Nave couldn't see the looks of hate from the sparring ring of the surrounding soldiers as they entered the light. All of them despised his very existence. He'd never forget when 2 years prior, at only the age of 5, as he was thrown into the accursed ring for the first time. Alone and scared, he faced down several soldiers who beat him within an inch of his life. King Arshnad II apologized sincerely to Nave for his little experiment afterward and vowed it would never happen again. If not for Raja stepping in and stopping the fight, Nave may have very well died that day. There were other parts of the memory he couldn't quite recall, but he knew trauma had a way of blocking the past away. The soldiers involved all disappeared shortly thereafter, and Nave was glad of it. Since that time, the soldiers had verbally tormented him whenever possible. If not for the king's unquestioned need of him, their hatred would have expanded to Raja if King Arshnad hadn't stepped in personally to prevent the near murder. Nave didn't understand any of it then, but he surmised the fact that he was a foreign child was all it took to cause an attack among the Hathos. Now their intolerance meant little to Nave. Raja left him in the center ring and climbed up to watch his post, leaving Nave alone, again. His clear voice rang over the rumbling group. "Double rations to the warrior who bests the king's champion." The group surged at its ranks as men stepped forward to answer the charge. "Don't worry," said the largest of the soldiers. "I'll be sure to bloody up that white tunic of yours real good." All at once, 10 grown men rushed the ring from all directions. Nave waited calmly as they neared ever closer, their speed less than a steady walk to his senses. Before the group could reach him, he had 3 of the soldiers unarmed with carefully placed jabs to key nerve spots in their forearms and shoulders. Nave quickly jumped backward, knocking the wind out of the 2 to his rear with precisely executed kicks. Battle had become increasingly easier for him. One would even go as far as to say it was like second nature to him. No longer feeling as if he was fighting for his life, Nave was merely following his adopted father's orders. He landed back in the center exactly where he began, his glare daring the others forward. The other men hesitated momentarily, staring from one another before yelling and rushing again. With a deep breath, Nave allowed himself to fall backwards onto his palms as they closed in over him. He quickly pushed off the ground and twisted violently with his legs, knocking their knees out from under them, their dulled sword harmlessly grazing over him just so. As Nave recovered his stance, he walked determinedly out of the ring. Raja stood up, pleased as usual with a chuckle in his voice. "Take Den to the healing ward. He appears to have a broken rib." Nave would be back 5 more times before the day was over. In the meantime, he went to his usual afternoon spot in an outer hall overlooking the castle's central garden. The slow babble of the makeshift river, combined with the breeze blowing through the ancient tree in its center, seemed to ease the edge, if only temporarily. Nave was only 7, but he knew his situation to be unnatural. He had everything a commoner could dream of. 5 of Arja's finest tutors, the south end of the castle complete with his own servants, and one of the finest warriors who ever lived as his personal trainer. Regardless, Nave still yearned for the freedom he had never known. He rested his head on his forearms on the intricately carved white railing and found himself absent-mindedly voicing the Argian Knight's code. "Who are we but loyal servants, men of muscle, sinew, and bone, a living shield for the king of Argia, of whose glory is widely known. We give our lives to you, great king, to stay our homeland's suffering." These words always reminded him of a time when he was very young, when he had first tried to run away. He recounted the night When he ran out of the northern gate and towards the large forest, Arshnod himself appeared before him, and it startled Nave to the point he instinctively tapped into an inner power. Nave couldn't remember exactly what it was he had done, but Arshnod was somehow kept at bay, seemingly through his willpower alone. He remembered Arshnod struggling against invisible bonds that held him in place, but he calmed himself and somehow cast Nave to sleep by whispering something in a foreign tongue. When Nave awoke, he was locked within the lower antechambers of the castle dungeon and spoon-fed the Knight's Creed over and over again until morning. During this period, Nave would repeat the words mechanically, but be left in doubt. Of course the king has to be protected, and of course the kingdom is worth laying down one's life for, but does a man of his skill really need my protection? Sometimes he felt the questions would eventually drive him mad, but there was no helping his fate. Young master, it's time for your history lesson, came a voice to his right. Nave let his arms fall from the railing and followed his tutor at a reluctant pace. What's on the agenda today? Many of how my ancestors enslaved the world? Nave chided, his following tutor's uptight shadow into the library and to his usual cushions situated at the far wall. He was tasked with sitting in place while they looked down on him from their podiums. Nave emptied his mind for the routine and settled into an almost trance-like state. As soon as Nave plopped down, the questions rang out. Who united the wilds and created the kingdom of Aja? King Arshnod I, Nave replied methodically. What is the name of the treaty ending the uprising in the south a decade ago? The Laren Trade Treaty. Who was the author of this treaty? Nave sighed. My late Uncle Laren, of course. What avian species represents our kingdom? The peacock. And what is the value of silver peacock Aussie and standard fowl chips? 1,000 golden fowl chips. In copper wings? 500 copper quail wings, although it varies by nation. So then what is the standard of silver exchange among our eastern continent? The owl feather. When was this practice of Aussie exchange first established? Nave opened his mouth to reply, but this was one question he actually didn't have an answer for. That's all right, continued Miss Misha to his right. No one can say for sure. In fact, it's a practice we may have inherited from your kind, the Ovean, because this form of currency stretched beyond recorded history, but it does come with a fair deal of poaching, which I'm sure you can answer with the punishment that is. Hard labor in the mines, but depending on the scale and class of animals poached, death. Correct, said Miss Misha. The Ajan Mint regulates the various bone caches and mines with extreme force, gold being common, copper being second, and silver retaining the highest value. Forgery is easy enough to spot without the unique branding on the back. Can you tell us the brand used by the kingdom of Ireniel? The questions continued like this for an hour, until Raja appeared at the doorway. Knave, are you ready for the second bout? Do you really have to ask? Knave replied, looking back at him sullenly. The light dimmed in the west, casting a beautiful array of violet and red across the city, as Knave stared down from the balcony of his room, more like a posh prison. From there he could see the awnings closed over the fruit stands, and the children running through the town square. They appeared to be splashing around in a fountain that was dedicated to his late Uncle Laren. He was said to have perished 7 years ago when their armies purged the demons that inhabited the forest of the dam to the northeast. Knave wished he could have known Laren, another Ovean like himself. Even though he was strictly forbidden, or perhaps because of it, he desperately wanted to get a closer look at the statue and join in with the other children. Closing his eyes, Knave listened intently to the sound of the castle. All was silent for the moment, and this seemed like a perfect chance. Knave undid the royal military braid that held his hair back and jumped over the edge of the balcony, bounding down the sides of the tower and an adjacent wall. Upon landing, he rolled forward, embraced the momentum, and raced down into the city. He had made it, and best of all, no one had noticed. As Knave ran, he could hear a few startled gasps from the nobles walking the path toward their luxurious manors just below the castle battlements. He didn't care. Today he was acting his own age, and he could feel the rush of life that he'd been missing. As he entered the city square, Knave was shocked to find the base of the statue had been vandalized along the base with black markings. He didn't recognize the symbols, but he climbed into the fountain around its base and found they were easy enough to wipe clear with just water in his bare hands. As he finished, he climbed back out of the fountain to finally look upward into the immortalized face of his late uncle. The sunlight bathed him in a brilliant cascade of refracting water, but the face wasn't one he was expecting. It was frightening. It was the face of determination, anger, and something else. There was something about him that reminded him of Arshnod. Does this similarity lie in the strong eyebrows and malicious grin? Nave was too busy studying the statue to notice as a boy in his teens walked up beside him. Hey, you! Nave turned to face him in surprise. Oh, hello. This is what he'd been waiting for, finally. What's wrong with your ears, girly boy? Asked the teen gruffly as other children, damp from the fountain, formed a small crowd behind him. What? Nave asked, becoming cautious. I've heard about your kind from my dad and his friends. You're one of those Oveyan, aren't you? You're like him, said the teen, pointing up at the statue. Well, yes, you see, but I live, Nave began to reply. Before he could continue, the boy threw a punch which caught Nave by surprise, but he easily dodged. Dill, you see this thing here? The teen yelled to one of the boys in the small mob with true anger in his eyes. He's one of those Oveyan the church warned us about, the kind that killed your father. Wait, what are you talking about? Nave said in shock as he was surrounded on all sides. We Hathos are free to walk our own path. The evil age of Oveyan's over. Taos has led us out of the darkness. How dare you show your face here? A little girl rushed forward and grabbed his lace. Hurry, brother, I got him, she said. Other smaller children rushed forward and began pulling on Nave's clothes, attempting to hold him in place. Nave could easily have broken free, but resisted at the risk of harming one of the smaller children. A young married couple looked on in fear as the kids pushed in around him. Let him go! Leave him alone! The wife yelled. But other onlookers threw wary glances her way. Her husband stepped forward and led her back into one of the surrounding homes. Nave looked forward at the house pleadingly and saw the woman's tears through the window of her home as the older boys began pummeling him. Nave didn't look away as he was kicked and punched against the cold stone street. So what if one of his kind had wounded a Hathos? He was still an individual apart from that. Why are they hurting me? Once he was satisfied, the lead teen walked away and the others followed, leaving Nave bloody and bruised. The youngest of the children looked back with her finger in her trembling mouth and remorse in her eyes, but soon followed after the group. The sun had set as Nave felt cold. A deep well had opened at his chest, and he let loose a sob of agony. The tears that burst forth were not just from the physical pain. Nave has always felt alone, but now, having experienced firsthand the extent of the Hathos fear and hatred that had been passed on through the ages, he felt truly alien. As Nave wrapped his arms around his swollen head, he felt it. A piece of the upper half of his right ear had been ripped off in the attack. Deep in the endless black, a monstrous creature racked its talons against his scales, wailing forth its anger and sadness. Nave didn't belong here, and the king knew it. Perhaps he was protecting Nave after all. Arshnod knew his people thought of Nave, and now so did he, as he recalled the passerbys who did nothing to help him. In fact, some of them seemed happy. It was the first time he noticed the statue that Laren was facing. A giant symbol of a man walking alone, with his back turned and arms outstretched with an eternal circle, was cast in bronze above large wooden doors, clearly marking it as the Church of Taos, home to the Lord of Judgment. Nave curled his head down toward his knees and closed his eyes tight in anguish as closed sheets of rain began to douse the square. Nave, is that you? Rang out a familiar voice from the darkness. Taos' name, who did this to you? Nave felt warm, familiar hands raise him into their arms. Raz blazed up the path, back up to what now Nave viewed as a welcomed home. Raz placed Nave gently onto his bed and began tending his wounds with materials from his side pouch. That was very foolish move you pulled tonight, Nave, a deep voice growled from the doorway. Arshnod finished by tossing Nave's corded braid at his feet. Raz turned around in anger, but said nothing. Follow me to the throne room. Fret not, Raz, said Arshnod, as Raz made to protest. Little Nave can handle much worse. Arshnod was making light of how injured he really was, but Nave pushed past Raz's arm aside and limped after the king. When Nave reached the throne room, Arshnod was already seated and staring intently at the grand carpet scrawled across the floor. Even though the room was well lit by many candles and torches, there was always a coldness present. As Nave entered, Arshnod took his head aside with a concerned expression. I have a few questions I have to ask. There are things I must know, Nave said boldly. The concern was replaced by a flicker of anger, which quickly shifted to compassion. Go on then. Ask what you wish, said Arshnad. Knave focused for a moment before proceeding. I want to know more about my birth parents. Who are they really, and why are there no other Ovain like me in this kingdom? The king sat upright and pursed his lips, raising one leg to rest on the other before answering. Perhaps it is best that you know more after what you've just been through, Arshnad relinquished as he sat forward to rest his elbows on his knees. Knave, your parents attempted a pilgrimage to the burial ground of the Arjan royalty in some sort of wicked bone-harvesting tradition for your people's unholy religious ceremonies, a damnable act by anyone. Surely it was to endow you, he hesitated, their son, with the wicked magics they once possessed. Apparently, it is of the utmost importance to perform this heinous act upon a child shortly after birth. That place to the east is our most holy land, the burial ground of my fathers, and your parents paid the ultimate price for their disrespect of our dead. Your Uncle Laren was my closest friend and sole advisor. Apparently, they derived the location of our sacred burial ground through intercepted communications he'd sent on my behalf to their king. He felt as guilty as any for their crime, but he still spoke on their behalf at the trial, even calling forth a jury of Ovain peers. The decision was unanimous because the remaining Ovain turned away from those dark rituals ages ago in pursuit of peace with the rest of us. Arshnad spat in spite. Even so, no one in this kingdom, perhaps all of Ovea, trusts your people. But as king, I must be of a higher mind to rule. No child should be left to die for the sins of their parents. Thus, I took you in and raised you as my own. It was the only way. Can you believe the citizens of Aja asked for your blood as well? He declared, pointing at Knave's chest. Knave couldn't respond. The shock overwhelmed him. Arshnad's hand swept toward the east. I've kept you from entering those lands to this day in order to protect you from the almighty Taos' wrath. If I were to have you grown as a common boy within the city, you'd have been dead long ago. But I've given you everything a father could give his own son. A loving home, a title, and a future. You are to be my best and most trusted knight. Together, we can clear the record of what's happened and show them your worth. When the time comes, I will reveal your true responsibilities and the greatness that lies in your future. Knave stood motionless, unsure of how to respond. The wave of emotions flowing through him ranged from sadness, horror, and guilt, and lastly, to admiration. My king, I won't bring this matter up ever again. You have my word, Knave said as tears welled up once again. This time Arshnad had unveiled more than prior accounts. Knave knew his parents had trespassed on the kingdom's holy land, but to learn they were grave robbers, the thought made him sick to his stomach. Later that evening, in a fit of restlessness, Knave lit a fire in the ground and sat with the doors to his balcony open so he could look up at the stars. He pulled the wool blanket from his bed and wrapped it protectively around himself as he sat on the floor. He couldn't rid himself of the countless negative thoughts of his parents and the unwarranted attack earlier that day. He felt cautiously at his torn ear and cursed aloud, slamming a fist to the ground as new tears welled up again. He gasped at the sound of his bedroom door creaking open slightly and quickly rubbed the tears away with the edge of the blanket. Sorry, Knave, it's just me, said Arshnad, poking his head in. May I come in? Why not, said Knave, facing away from him again and clutching the blanket tighter around himself. What are you doing on the floor there? Arshnad asked as he approached. I can't sleep. Is it any wonder? Asked Arshnad. Knave, I want to apologize for earlier. I'm just as much a product of my upbringing as any, and let's just say my father was a practitioner of tough love. I wasn't always in agreement with his methods, but perhaps I wouldn't be king today if not for it. Knave didn't reply. He didn't have much to say on such action. But it said that dreams are a map of one's soul. The Mujuhugan would have believed that the